Welcome and thank you for tuning into A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 with Lindsay, Manisha, Nilafar, Saunas, Isaiah, and Kristen.
We are third-year nursing student at Vancouver Island University in Nanaimo. We are here working to demystify health issues in and around our community, bringing you evidence-based information about your healthcare options.
This information is for educational purposes only and does not replace the advice of your primary healthcare provider.
We'd like to start by acknowledging and thanking the Nanaimo First Nations, whose traditional territory we have the opportunity to learn, live, and share educational experiences on.
Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Nilufar, and I'm your host for today's program. I am very excited to be with you, but more so excited because of our special guests, who I will introduce soon. In today's show, the topic for our discussion is about mental health, the most essential element of well-being. We are also going to share some facts about mental illnesses while concentrating on some of the social determinants of health that contribute to mental well-being, talk about stigma and discrimination, explore different grassroots initiatives happening in Nanaimo, and introduce some useful resources in our community. But first, let us draw your attention to some useful facts about mental well-being. In today's fast-paced life, everyone is at risk of developing illnesses relating to mental health. This issue is very subtle but serious when it comes to youth. Some of us may think that since youth do not work in stressful jobs or not have the responsibility of dependence, they may not be affected by mental health challenges. However, if we observe deeply, youth are more so at risk of such challenges as they are grown out of their immediate circles, which they belong to, and are joining the bigger tribe, which is composed of their peers. Their personality is still to be shaped, and much discovery is in their journey to come. So, if you are a youth, or a parent of a youth, or simply know people who are at this stage of life cycle, let us share with you a number of important facts.
Thank you, Nilafar. This is Kristen here, and I have some interesting mental health facts from the Canadian Mental Health Institute that has been around for over 100 years. Did you know that 1 in 5 people experience mental health problems or illnesses in Canada? Mental health doesn't discriminate. It affects people of all ages, education, income levels, and cultures. Suicide accounts for 20% of all deaths among 15 to 24-year-olds and 60% among 25 to 44-year-olds in Canada. In BC, about 70%, somewhere around 800,000 people, experience mental health illness or substance use issues today. An estimated 84,000 children and youth in BC have a diagnosed mental illness, and yet less than one-third of those children who seek help receive mental health services. That means as many as 50,000 children in BC are not receiving the treatment they need. In terms of cost, the government of British Columbia had estimated that mental health problems cost the economy an estimated $6.6 billion annually. While these statistics can be quite staggering, accessing services can be a challenge from those suffering from mental health illnesses. These can be due to socioeconomic factors that can be outside your control and affect your health. As discussed in a previous show, these are called the social determinants of health. One big determinant that affects mental health is access to housing. However, it isn't just housing that can be a challenge. Other determinants can feed into lack of housing and provide their own difficulties, such as trying to obtain housing. This can be due to less opportunities for income for those with mental illnesses. Your income is also based on your education. Where you went to school, and if you continue on to higher education, is then tied back to your own ability, and even that your family's, to provide the necessary support income-wise for that schooling. However, a positive change in housing can also change other areas of a person's well-being. Good housing has been shown to promote social inclusion and access to opportunities. These are just a few examples on how these determinants can affect your health and also provide bigger obstacles for those living with mental health illnesses. However, there are positive changes taking place and a push for more affordable and supportive housing here in Nanaimo. On our Facebook page, we will have a link to information from the Regional District of Nanaimo of local supportive housing options. Now I'm going to hand it over to Manisha, and she'll talk to you about mental health, but more specifically about depression. Manisha?
Thank you, Kristen. Hello, everyone. This is Manisha, and thanks for listening to A Sound Constitution at 101.7 FM CHLY. I'm going to explain what mental health is and how it impacts a person's life. Mental health comprises our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we feel, think, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. Mental health is important at every stage of life. Many factors contribute to mental health problems, including biological factors such as genes or brain chemistry, life experiences such as trauma or abuse, and family history of mental health problems. There are various types of mental health issues, out of which I'm going to discuss depression. Major depression is a common illness that severely limits psychosocial functioning and diminishes quality of life. In 2008, World Health Organization ranked major depression as the third cause of burden of disease worldwide and projected that the disease will rank first by 2030. In order to explain it, I'm going to read the poem Depression by Andrew Matron, which was featured in American Journal of Nursing. You're a cardboard effigy of yourself, racked, torn, left outside a vacant movie house. At midnight in the rain, you consider it likely that in the morning some man will toss you into the back of his truck, drive you to a field, prop you up, and use you for target practice. You are okay with this. This poem illustrates how disconnected one becomes with their surroundings and is usually not interested in the activities or things they used to do. It is not easy to move on or cheer up, as people with depression are told. That is because it is a disorder which involves chemical imbalance in the brain, and it is more than mere a sadness. It is important to recognize the signs and symptoms early on. Here is an audio from InfoBase and Wellness Network, Anxiety and Mental Health Association in America, explaining depression.
I didn't think I had depression or that I would ever get depression. It wasn't something that I've ever talked to my family about or my doctors about.
It was getting in the way of my relationships. It was getting in the way of my ability to function at school. I felt like I was paralyzed by whatever this was going on in my mind and in my body.
Life does not always go like we want it to. When we lose a job, fail an exam, or when a loved one dies, we feel sad. But there's a difference between sadness and experiencing the lasting effects of depression.
When I first told people this is what I have, a lot of the responses I received were, "Why do you have depression?" And how do you answer that? I don't know why I have it. I don't know where it came from. So I think people were mixing it up with sadness, and they're two different things.
Depression is a mood disorder in which feelings of sadness, loss, anger, or frustration interfere with everyday life for weeks or longer. Symptoms of depression include an irritable mood most of the time, trouble sleeping or sleeping too much, change in appetite, often with weight gain or loss, tiredness and lack of energy, feelings of worthlessness, self-hate or guilt, difficulty concentrating, feeling hopeless or helpless, repeated thoughts of death or suicide.
Depression has many symptoms and it can be really individual. For most people it's characterized by sadness. For kids it can be irritability. Lack of motivation or enjoyment of things is also present. Poor sleep, poor appetite, sometimes even feelings that life's not worth living or suicidal thoughts can be part of depression.
My depression looks like the sadness just becomes too overwhelming, and I might start to stare off and then just start to cry. Even if I'm in a public place, even if I'm with people I care about. It also looks like me wanting to stay in my bed. I start to feel really bad about myself, think about a lot of negative things, focus on failure, shortcomings, feeling like I'm not good enough.
What is depression is a difficult question to answer because depression can look so different in some people. So one person who's depressed could be very tearful and losing sleep, losing weight, agitated, restless. And another person with depression, they could be kind of numbed and apathetic and sleeping way too much, gaining weight, and really lethargic.
As mentioned in the audio, it is okay to ask for help if symptoms are present. Depression usually starts between the ages of 15 and 30 and is much more common in women. In a book called Depression, Cognitive Behavior Therapy with Children and Young People, the authors explain that until the 1970s, depressive symptoms were considered a normal part of adolescence. Mood swings, low mood, and irritability were seen as consequences of developmental changes involved in the onset of puberty, adjusting to increasing independence and role changes. It is now recognized that depression can severely impair a young person in many important aspects of life, including school, peer and social relationships. In severe depression, the young children may feel guilty and personally responsible for any past problems. This can be associated with suicidal thoughts. Commonly, a vicious circle is created in which symptoms of depression enhance themselves. For example, inactivity leads to disturbed sleep and to increased time for worrying, both of which increase the symptoms of low mood, which in turn leads to further inactivity. Lack of sleep and poor concentration can lead to problems with schoolwork and an increasing sense of failure. Several suggested approaches to deal with depression include recognizing early signs, seeking professional treatment, talking to family and friends, and developing effective coping skills, which can help an individual to cope and come out of depression. These coping skills include meditation, mindfulness, physical activity, etc. These skills help an individual build resiliency and increases the odds to survive against depression, which in some people even leads to suicidal ideation. Now, Kristen and I are going to shift the focus to stigma around mental health, which prevents people seeking treatment or even reaching out for help. Stigma of mental illness can be defined as negative attitude based on prejudge and misinformation. The presence of stigma starts a vicious circle that leads to discrimination, decreasing self-esteem, and a high probability of relapse for those in remission. The fight against stigma requires involvement of government, healthcare providers, the media, and general public. The focus must be on specific problems that result from stigma.
Here we have a clip from Sangu Dell's TED Talk on tackling stigma behind mental illness.
For me, the stigma is personal. In 2009, I received a frantic call in the middle of the night. My best friend in the world, a brilliant, philosophical, charming, hip young man, was diagnosed with schizophrenia. I witnessed some of the friends we'd grown up with recoil. I heard the snickers. I heard the whispers. Did you hear he has gone mad? He started to derogatory, demeaning commentary about his condition, words we would never say about someone with cancer or someone with malaria. Somehow, when it comes to mental illness, our ignorance eviscerates all empathy. I stood by his side as his community isolated him, but our love never wavered. Tacitly, I became passionate about mental health, inspired by his plight. I helped found the Mental Health Special Interest Alumni Group at my college. And during my tenure as a resident tutor in graduate school, I supported many undergraduates with their mental health challenges. I saw African students struggle and unable to speak to anyone. Even with this knowledge and with their stories in tow, I in turn struggled and could not speak to anyone when I faced my own anxiety. So deep is our fear of being the madman. All of us, but we Africans especially, need to realize that our mental struggles do not detract from our virility, nor does our trauma taint our strength. We need to see mental health as important as physical health. We need to stop suffering in silence. We must stop stigmatizing disease and traumatizing the afflicted. Talk to your friends. Talk to your loved ones. Talk to health professionals. Be vulnerable. Do so with the confidence that you are not alone. Speak up if you're struggling. Being honest about how we feel does not make us weak. It makes us human. It is time to end the stigma associated with mental illness. So the next time you hear mental, do not just think of the madman. Think of me.
And if you're just tuning in now, that was Sangu Dell's TED Talk on tackling stigma behind mental illness there.
Mental illness is a serious issue that affects a huge amount of people in our society. It is imperative to take mental health as seriously as physical health and to normalize problems. The education and awareness on this issue can help people realize that they're not alone and can always seek help that they need.
So what can you do to help? Start thinking of mental health as part of your normal health checkup. Think of it as someone is living with a mental illness. They are not defined by it. Having a mental illness and seeking help does not make you weak. Would you go to a doctor when you're physically unwell? Why not the same if your mind is unwell? Support those who are open about their mental illness and encourage them to take on a leadership role to help tackle the stigma. This has been Manisha and Kristen talking about mental health, and more specifically around depression. Now we're going to turn it over to Sanas here and her topic on health promotion for your mental health. Thanks for tuning in to A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7.
Welcome back. You are listening to A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM. In this segment, I'm going to talk about mental health promotion. World Health Organization 2001 states, mental health promotion is an umbrella term that covers a variety of strategies, all aimed at having a positive effect on mental health. The encouragement of individual resources and skills and improvement in socioeconomic environments are among them. According to Canadian Public Health Association 1996, mental health promotion is the process of enhancing the capacity of individuals and communities to take control over their lives and improve their mental health. It uses strategies that foster supportive environments and individual resilience, while showing respect for equity, social justice, interconnections, and personal dignity. Now, I'm going to talk about how does mental health promotion work. According to Mental Health Promotion, a lifespan approach book, strengthening individuals such as increasing emotional resilience through intervention designed to promote self-esteem, life and coping skills such as communicating, negotiating, relationship, and parenting skills. Second one is through strengthening communities that involves increasing social inclusion and participation, improving neighborhood environments, developing health and social services which support mental health, anti-bullying strategies in schools, community safety, childcare, and self-help networks. And finally, reducing structural barriers to health through initiatives to reduce discrimination and inequalities, and to promote access to education, meaningful employment, housing services, and support for those who are vulnerable.
Up next, here is a song by Andre Noble, Chief ME, called Main Event.
Welcome to the main event. You're the star of this heaven sent reality in which you call home, in which there's no way to be alone. It's perfect, and it's the place to be. Oh, and it's perfect, and it's the place to be. And welcome on the biggest stage. Your whole life is led up to this day. You are the one you're waiting for. It's a knocking on your open door. It's now, and it's the place to be. And it's now, and it's the place to be. And all this time we've been just fine. Even when we think we're not, it's only 'cause we forgot that we came here for a reason. So welcome to the main event. We're the stars of this heaven sent reality in which we call home, in which there's no way to be alone. It's perfect, and it's the place to be. Yeah, and it's now, and it's the place to be.
That was Main Event by Andre Nobel, Chief ME. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM, and today we're talking about mental health. We were fortunate to have the chance of interviewing 3 individuals who are truly passionate and have been actively working to support younger generations in our community. Our first interview is with Taban Behin. She's currently doing a PhD program under Social Dimensions of Health at the University of Victoria. Thanks, Taban, for joining us today. I would like to first start and ask you a little more about your research focus.
Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. My name is Taban, as you mentioned, and I'm currently, as you mentioned earlier, is just doing a PhD under the Social Dimensions of Health at the University of Victoria. Now, the research focus that I have is related to the well-being of children in their middle years, so between the ages of 11 and 15, and looking at the impact of technology and their interaction with technology. I'm taking sort of a broader approach where I'm looking at this whole idea of consciousness, and consciousness meaning their awareness of themselves, their awareness of their relationships with each other, with their families and their communities, and seeing really perhaps like designing a community-based research project that would help them to see how technology can actually be more beneficial or useful or be utilized in a way that is of benefit to improving relationships and improving their well-being.
Thanks, Taban. What motivates you to do this?
It's a good question. I've asked myself the same thing as well. Over the past few years, probably I've lived in Nanaimo for 8.5 years. I've had the bounty of being able to interact with a lot of children and sort of this middle years range, this 11 to 15-year-olds. And whether it's through this formal program that will be described a bit more later, the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program, or just even through friendship, I've realized that actually even in these 8 years, I've seen a tremendous shift in the way that young people are interacting with technology and the way that technology has been impacting their lives. And I don't know how aware we are of those shifts. We may be at the level of time spent on iPads or knowing about lurkers or people who are trolling on social media. But I think there's actually greater implications than just those kind of obvious issues related to technology. And that's what is of interest to me.
Thank you. That's great. How do you think your research or similar research like yours can shed light to mental well-being of the younger generation?
I think my research, one of the lenses that I use for my research is called a rights-based approach. So I see it as really like a human right. The United Nations actually came out with a convention on the rights of the child in 1991. And that convention actually speaks to all the aspects of children's well-being and what we can do as a society, as a human family, to protect the rights of our next generation. Really, that's right, ensuring the well-being of our future generations. So I take this on because technology is actually one of the articles in that UN declaration. It's article number 17, and it talks about the right of every child to have access to media, to information, to technology that is of benefit to their emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. So this is why I think my research actually relates to this whole element of fostering well-being in children.
Thank you for sharing your focus of study, Taban. You mentioned that in focusing on the impacts of technology on the consciousness of younger generations, we often think of well-being and health as nutrition and physical health. It is interesting that you're looking at the social dimensions of health. Can you explain a little more what you mean by social dimensions?
Sure, I'll try my best without getting too academic about it. I think, really when we look at health, as you mentioned, we often do just think about physical health or aspects that affect our physical health. But we don't often think about, firstly, this element of mental, emotional, or spiritual health. So those are also health outcomes in an individual's life. Nor do we think about community health, the well-being of a community. On the other side of things, we don't think about what actually impacts our health. So even if we are looking just even at our physical health, we can see that, and it's been time and again studied through various different perspectives, and there are different theories. And if you even look at, for instance, there's one theory around the life course, saying that whatever happened to us in our earlier years actually has a huge impact on how we even physically deal with our health. So inequalities in our experiences in childhood. So if we had, for instance, we grew up in a home where there were challenges to, let's say, even socioeconomic challenges with employment, if there were challenges to the family makeup, cultural first-generation immigrant versus, indigenous background, whatever it is, all of those things play out and have an impact on even how we access health care, and then in turn, how we address health concerns. So this, again, it comes back to what I mentioned earlier about this idea of a rights-based. It really is a human right, that we really do need to look at health as a fundamental issue of justice, and how we address it really does come down to how we look at basically the nobility of every single person in this world.
Now I'm really interested in learning more about social dimensions of health and the implications on individuals, family, and communities, as well as institutions. Can you give any examples of this?
I certainly can. Actually, I have the privilege of working under one of the world-renowned researchers at the University of Victoria. She's based there. She works with something called Global Child, and it's basically an organization that has been asked by the United Nations to help to evaluate what I mentioned earlier, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Children. There are about 44 articles there, and each of those articles relate to different aspects of the well-being of children. So Dr. Vahri is her name, and she has been given a large grant to work towards over a number of years to evaluate how different countries around the world are actually addressing each of these social determinants or these articles that relate to social determinants of health. So one of them has to do with, for instance, education. Another one has to do with access to technology, as I mentioned earlier. There's even the right to play. There's the right to language and history and ancestral information. There's even this idea of the right to have access to family and be part of one's extended family. So there's all of these conventions that are, or all of these articles that are put within this convention, and they all relate to the well-being of children, as I mentioned. So one example of a study that was done in 2012 that looked at even just to illustrate a little bit of why these are so important and why all these elements of our social well-being relate to our health and our well-being. She actually carried out a study in 2012 that looked at the relationship between maternal education with cortisol levels of Vancouver preschoolers. So cortisol is sort of a stress hormone that you produce when you undergo any sort of stressful situation. So they essentially analyzed the hair follicles of young preschoolers, and they linked it somehow with this and associated it with maternal education. And what they found was that those who had less than a high school education level, actually their children had a higher cortisol level. So and just to give you a sense of it, is almost double than someone who actually, a parent who had some post-secondary education or a post-secondary degree. Now, that's not to say that somehow it is the parent's fault in any way, shape, or form. It's more than thinking about all the other aspects of that in that parent's life. In this case, they were looking at young mothers, thinking about all the other things that they might be facing that might have prevented them from properly accessing education, and then how that would then have an impact and place stress on the family and then on the child that is growing up within that family. So this is what I was talking about, and seeing how complex really it is, and how really then when we do talk about the social dimensions of health, it permeates at all levels of society. And as I mentioned, even institutions are involved, and individuals and the community are all involved in it.
In looking back at your research, You mentioned that you're looking at technology and its impact on the lives of middle years children. You have also mentioned how complex the social dimensions of health are. In light of this, how will you address that complexity? And how are you hoping your research will help to improve the well-being of future generations?
It's a really good question. I think it's something that I've grappled with for some time, and I think it relates to maybe going back to the grassroots. And this is what has called me back to Nanaimo, because as mentioned, I'm studying at the University of Victoria, but I've really tried to focus my research around Nanaimo territory and really basing it here. I also think that going back to the grassroots through community-based research, which is where one brings a series of questions and just brings a toolbox of skills and abilities and whatever it is I have to offer, but offers it to the community and asks the community to really shape the research. And the research itself will hopefully be action-based. That's the aim of the research, is that in fact, whether it is that we design a video game together and test its feasibility and it's focused around something related to the well-being of the young people, or whether it's through a series of conversations, whatever it is that the community feels would be of greatest benefit. And again, as mentioned, I'm working, or maybe I didn't mention, but I'm working with urban Aboriginal populations in Nanaimo and hopefully linked to organizations like the Nanaimo Aboriginal Center and their Sinala complex in particular, where I've had a number of friendships over many years. It's really through those relationships that I hope that we can design something that would be of benefit to the community and really keep it as practical and as close to the level of really the young people that I'm hoping to work with so that they can actually shape the research itself. So that's where the research itself will go. Now, the implications of that then can be carried up and up and up, depending on that whole element of what we call knowledge translation, which is where we take our findings that are hopefully rooted in what is real and what is in the community, and we translate it. We take it up to the policy level and we say, look, this is what we see happening on the ground. How do we help to better shape our practices and our policies at an institutional level, whether it's through the school system, whether it's through the healthcare system, and so that we can actually address some of the fundamental issues that we see emerging through the research itself. But that's part of my work. But the first part really is the fun part, is where I get to be in the community and be alongside my friends.
And now here's a song by Kuboms called How Much Time.
This life is short. I don't want to waste no time. So close both your eyes. Pretend that you're blind today. Now hold my hand tight. We'll walk the whole night with you. Tell me your dreams. I wanna hear your everything. Tell me your dreams. Just wanna know where I fit in. Do I fit in? And how much time have we wasted? Have we wasted away? Are we wasting away? I sit on fire. I'm full of desire too. I'm gonna take on the world, mama. I wanna do it all with you, all with you. You're in my dreams. I think about you all the time, all the time. I'm drifting at sea. Just gotta know the bottom line, 'cause you're on my mind. And how much time have we wasted?
are we wasting? I would love to get the beauty of it all, and I would love to feel the sun on my face. It'll be okay for you and me. It's gonna be
That song was called How Much Time by Cuba Ohms. You are listening to 101.7 CHLY, and this is a Sound Constitution. This series is focusing on mental health of the younger generation. This is Nilufar. The next individuals I'm interviewing are Shiva Ghorbanpur and Anisa Jahromi. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us. Yes, thank you.
Can one of you tell us about the program you're involved with?
For sure. So as Taban mentioned earlier about her research work with the younger generation, our involvement on a volunteer basis is also working with that specific age group. And so the formal program that we volunteer with is called the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program. And so it's an educational program specifically for the ages between 11 and 15, as this is a very critical age and time in one's development in all factors, including mental, physical, and spiritual as well. And so the program itself happens all around the world and has been in Nanaimo for over 10 years now. And as the title of the program sheds light on, it being an empowerment program for younger individuals, basically at the root of the program, the volunteers see the participants as having a lot of capacity to give back to their community, despite the challenges that are associated with this age group. And because they are now in a transition state from being children to adults, some of the challenges they face including having this newly awakened consciousness of the injustices that they see, whether in their families or in the world in general. But despite this, we really see the junior youth as an amazing age group with a big desire to give back.
Thank you, Anisa. It's great to hear about the program in general terms and the fact that it's happening all around the world. Can you tell us what you do in the program?
For sure. So practically on a weekly basis, the junior youth get together in a group, and sometimes they meet more than once a week. And together with the aid of their animator, which is the group leader, they get together and we study materials that were specifically developed for the program. And these educational materials are usually in the form of a story of junior youth, much like themselves. And it deals with exploring moral concepts, but also reinforcing literacy skills. And so, for example, we would explore what is true friendship? What are the qualities or the inner qualities that we need to see in a true friend, such as being patient or being loving? And also practical implications that relate to their lives. So, for example, with our own friends, if we go through challenges, how do we work through them instead of holding grudges? And in addition to the study of these materials, the group engages in arts, sports, and give back to their community. So a big part of the program is service. And so the junior youth will come up with different service project ideas. So with the help of their animator, which is the group leader, they'll think about their neighborhood or their community and what are some of the challenges that they see. And related to these challenges, what are potential areas in which they could give back that address some of these challenges? So from early on, if a group just formed, it might be a simple project such as, there's a lot of garbage, let's pick it up. But then as the junior youth gain strength in being a group together and their consciousness of some of the challenges of their neighborhood increases, the service projects might take on a bit more of a formal role. So, for example, one group here in Nanaimo was really thinking about a way they could give back, and they decided to go and visit an elderly home. And the reason of this was because they thought about how
in society here where they live in, there's a disconnect between the younger generation and their elders. And so after going to the service project, we usually come together and reflect on, how did that impact you in a positive way?
Thank you very much, Anissa. How have you seen this program helping with the younger generation's mental health?
That's a really good question. Maybe I can speak to that. As Anissa mentioned, the program has these different aims, for example, giving back to the community and also enhancing the junior youth power of expression through these books that they study together. Really allows the junior youth to be empowered to go more and more in depth of who they are in the community and what are their talents and how are they going to give back to their community. So as Anissa was mentioning, for example, a regular service project that we do is with going and giving back by spending lots of time with the older generation in our community. This one simple act, especially given that it's a long period of time through like a 3-year program, you might be visiting weekly or bi-weekly the elderly, allows the junior youth really sees themselves as one of the protagonists in the whole community. So let's think about the different protagonists that we have. So for example, there is individuals who live in a community. There are institutions that govern and help the community to work together. And there's also the community itself that is made up of families and extended families. So the junior youth then learns how to interact with these different protagonists. And by this act of going to the elderly's home, a facility, and they're interacting with them, allows them to start thinking about others and start thinking about serving other in their community that even maybe they're not even so comfortable with, like a whole different generation. And they learn how to listen and be and actually learn from the older generation, where sometimes they might not have these interactions naturally happening with their extended family if they're not here, or they do have this and they're able to go beyond their extended family and spend time with the older generation. And this really helps if you want to talk about mental health, it allows individuals in this program to really find out who they are. It allows them to really see that actually at a young age, they're able to have an impact on people around them. And so therefore, it somehow gives them a purpose. And giving them a purpose allows them to really see themselves as active agents in their community, which might remove some of these anxieties they might have about themselves, about their peers, who they are and what they want to. Another part of the program that it actually happens quite regularly is also during these weekly group sessions that we have that Anissa mentioned earlier, is that we talk about what are some of social forces that junior youth are often interacting with. So some of these forces are good forces, like, for example, friendships that they have that empower one another, or school systems where they're really learning something. But in the same, even environments, there are also negative forces. So peer pressures that can happen amongst peers, and also even with schools, they might even feel incompetent to really be, they might feel incompetent to excel in education. And then also something that is really talked about is also bullying that happens in school or even in social media. So part of the aim of the program is to talk about these forces. But even before that, we try to first identify these forces on a regular basis in our groups. When a problem arises, we try to work through with just as simple as at the level of conversation, help the junior youth first articulate their reality. So when something has happened, we often ask them how can they describe that reality? How can they describe the incident? So that allows them to first conceptually articulate a scenario that has happened. And then once that's described, we help not just that individual that shared, but the whole group actually starts looking at what are some forces at play in that space that someone has articulated. So an example of this is often happens like when two friends really have something they're disagreeing with, or they want to do something, or whatever it is that comes up, is that we're able to create the safe environment in the group to be able to talk through these different social forces. And then we often then connect these forces to what are some higher virtues or principles that maybe allows us to strengthen these tools to be able to combat some of these forces. So for example, when there is friction between two friends, this principle of forgiveness or a principle of trying to be able to work with people with diversity. So embracing diversity would be of a principle that we're trying to work with the junior youth to raise to a higher level, so then they're able to go beyond even the generation before them and to be able to work through some of these regular things that even as adults we come across too.
Thank you, Shiva. I really appreciate the way in which you describe the impact the program has on the participants' mental health, as it is different than what we would normally consider addressing the mental health of individuals.
Yeah, I'll take it from here, Shiva. Yes, thanks for noticing that, Nilufar. It's true, and as Shiva really beautifully mentioned, when we were talking and when she was mentioning about the program itself and how the animators are helping the junior youth to really rely or seek fundamental principles, such as when she was talking about the case where if friends were fighting and understanding what forgiveness was or how to be, these fundamental things, seeing mental health in that way actually sheds light on a holistic approach to solving these problems. And actually, it's in a way of not seeing, addressing individual problems related to mental health, such as like depression or anxiety, which without a doubt, these are very valid factors or very valid things that people go through, especially today. But if you think about it, what's fundamentally missing in communities which give rise to these health concerns are a lack of oneness, or a lack of seeing each other as friends, or a lack of abiding to these higher principles of treating everybody with kindness despite differences. And although, we're on a path of actually applying these things in our real life, we're still very far from. And so as a result of not applying these principles into our daily lives or in our families, which constitute part of communities, which, like Shiva mentioned, in communities, there's individuals, there's institutions, as well as the community as a whole. If together we were really able to apply these things, then I don't think these separate health concerns would be so heavily emphasized. And even going back to what I had mentioned earlier, so when we were talking about in the weekly group sessions, we read these materials that talk about moral concepts and their stories of other junior youth. Sometimes the junior youth will look at us and say, this is so unrealistic. Nobody talks to each other this nicely. Families aren't this united in real life. And although what they're sharing is valid, it's not that this will never happen. It's just that it's so far from our current reality, right? And so it's also, when I really thought about it, as animators, our understanding of the program really greatly enhances through just being part of it and volunteering. And at first I was thinking about it like, they're right, this is not what they're used to. This isn't our reality right now, but it's not that it won't ever be that. It's serving as a standard in which we can learn to become like that. Not necessarily, exactly the same, but applying the principles to our daily lives. And so going back, kind of just a recap of everything we've talked about, going back to that question that Nilufar asked us around how does the program help with the participants' mental health. And so we talked about it in a very holistic approach, right? Not addressing specific issues that the junior youth may have, such as depression or anxiety, although we do address them because the junior youth seek comfort in their animators and advice. So that does happen. But this idea of learning about fundamental principles is at the root of the cause of a lot of our current health and mental health issues. But also going back to what Shiva shared earlier on one of the aims being enhancing the powers of expression. So through being in a group setting, through talking with others, through learning in a group environment, through going through the books together, it really helps the junior youth to think about how to express, the thoughts that are in their head, but sometimes when we try to verbalize it, it comes out totally different than what we were thinking. And so this power of expression or strengthening this skill also very much relates to, if we're having mental health related challenges, to actually seek out support, very practical support from professionals, whether counselors or individuals like that who are very skilled in that area to address specific issues. So, very practically, the program helps that through helping the junior youth develop these fundamental skills. And also another thing that came to mind with addressing the mental health of junior youth, the program itself, it doesn't just think about the junior youth, it's not like a drop-off program where they come every week and we do it, we do what we do in those 2 hours and then we don't see them for another week, but actually being very integrated in the lives of these junior youth as well as their families. So when we talked about earlier, or actually when it was mentioned earlier about social determinants of health, a big part of that is an individual's upbringing, right? And the interaction that they have with their family life.
Yeah.
So when junior youth are, they come for 2 hours and then leave, that we get a small glimpse into their life, but also really working with the families where the families are well aware what the program is seeking to do and the families are reinforcing what they're learning in the group. It becomes actually, we're actually starting to change community from fundamental level. And when we change community as a fundamental level, that's contributing to the other protagonists. And for more information about the Junior Youth Program, feel free to visit the website, www.junioryouth.bc.ca.
Thank you very much, Anisa and Shiva, for being with us today and sharing the grassroots approach and community building to address the mental well-being of the younger generation.
Here are some relaxation tips for your mental well-being.
Remember, we all are different.
Respect and value your feelings. Make time for the people you love. Keeping regular contact with friends and family can strengthen your relationships.
Learn something new.
Learning new skills can give you a sense of achievement. You could learn a new language, sign up for an art class, or try a new recipe. It doesn't have to be something big.
Do something you enjoy.
Whether it's taking a long walk, playing an instrument, or going to the nature, it's positive for your well-being to do something that makes you feel good.
Try relaxation techniques.
Doing something that you find relaxing, such as listening to music, coloring in, or having a bath, can help to reduce stress and improve your mental well-being.
Use peer support.
If you're finding things difficult, talking to people who you trust can help you feel good.
Try mindfulness.
Being present can help you to become more aware of and manage your thoughts, feelings, and surroundings. It can help you to enjoy life more and accept the world around you.
And last but not least, volunteer and get involved with service to the community.
Giving your time to those that need it can be extremely fulfilling and can help you to look at things from a a different perspective.
Here is a quotation from Baha'i writings which is relevant to what we just talked about.
Joy gives us wings. In time of joy, our strength is more vital, our intellect keener, and our understanding less clouded. We seem better able to cope with the world and to find our sphere of usefulness.
Have a joyful day! Your well-being isn't just about being physically well. It includes being mentally well and able to cope with everyday life stresses. If you feel that there are days where it is too much or just want to reach out to talk to someone, there are available resources here in Nanaimo and BC. If you are a VIU student, there are counseling services available free of charge. Just head to the Health and Wellness Center in Building 200. For residents of BC, you can call the BC Health Link 811 number to be put in touch with someone, or you can call the 310 Mental Health line at 310-6789. No need for an area code when calling in BC. For kids and teens 20 years old and younger, you can call the Kids Help Phone at 1-800-668-6868. Kids and teens can also text CONNECT, that is CONNECT, to 686868. Here on Vancouver Island University, the crisis line is 1-888-494-3888. And is available 24 hours. The Vancouver Island Crisis Society also has a texting option available from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Their text number is 250-800-3806. Aboriginal Child and Youth Mental Health in Nanaimo, which provides confidential, free outreach services for Aboriginal children, youth, and families who may be experiencing difficulties with thoughts, feelings, or behaviors. And lastly, for more information on pre-youth program, you may refer to www.junioryouth.ca. These resources will be listed on our Facebook page if you want to take a closer look at them.
As we come to the end of the episode, we encourage you to reach out to your healthcare practitioner and other health professionals for more information. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and as always, check out our Facebook page for resources from today's show.
If there is anything you would like to hear us talk about, let us know by email at asoundconstitution@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM.